Hey, welcome back. In this video, we are going to be sewing a new range bag. I've gone ahead and I've printed out the sewing pattern on A4 size paper, and here I'm just using a ruler to make sure the scale is correct. This sewing pattern is in two parts, part 1 and part 2. These little videos here are just showing you how to connect the pages together. I usually find it easier to connect the horizontal rows first. I recommend using glue or clear tape to connect them together. As you're connecting page to page, make sure you use a ruler to ensure that you do have an equal 1-inch grid throughout the whole sewing pattern. Sometimes when you print it, the pages might not properly be aligned and you want to make sure you have no issues. So as you can see here, I'm going along and I'm making sure each grid is 1-inch square throughout the entire pattern. Okay, once you've got the whole sewing pattern taped together, you can start cutting out the shapes. So this shape here is for a side pocket. If you've done everything correctly, these should just be 100% life size, so you can just cut them out and place them directly onto the fabric. I recommend using 600 denier Cordura nylon for this project, but I ordered it and they sent me 1000D, so that's what I'm working with. I like to start these projects by doing all the easy parts first. So this is just the inside pocket. So what I'm doing is I've cut out the inside pocket shape and I'm putting edge binding on the edge here just to stop the wear and tear from things going inside, outside the pocket all the time. I'm going to throw it on the sewing machine. I'm just using some nylon thread here and I'm just going to sew down the edge binding just to secure it in place. So the next piece we're going to build is going to be the carry handle strap. So this bag resembles the tool bag quite a bit. A lot of the parts look the same. So as for the carry handle, it's going to be the same technique used on the tool bag. We're just going to fold a piece of 2-inch nylon webbing in half. And we're going to go ahead and sew a box into it just so it keeps its handle shape. And this box here is going to be about a 1/8 inch seam allowance, just nice and close to the edge. As you can see, we're doing some easy parts first. So this piece here is just for an optional carry sling. It's a 1.5 inch D-ring and just a piece of webbing 1.5 inch wide. Okay, so we're ready to start placing all the pieces on the inside liner now. So we have the pocket, we have the carry handle sling, and the carry handle. Make sure you use your sewing pattern as a guide to line up all these pieces and just mark them with a pencil. I'll start by sewing the pocket, just 1/8 inch seam allowance, just a temporary stitch just to hold it in place while we assemble the bag. Next, we're going to secure our D-ring nylon piece. We're just going to sew a box into the nylon about 1/8 inch from the edge, and this will secure it in place. Ensure when you're stitching this box that it stops about 1 inch from the top, because when we assemble this bag later, this D-ring piece is going to have to be folded down to connect the gusset. Next is our carry handle. This is going to be the same thing. You're just going to sew a box into it 1/8 inch from the edge, and make sure to stop at least 1 inch from the top of the fabric. Make sure when you sew the other side of this carry handle that you've not kinked it or twisted it in any way, just so you don't have to pull all these stitches out again. So everything we've done on this inside liner piece, the carry handle, the D-ring, the pocket, we have to do this twice because one of these pieces are going to be on either side of the bag, but I'm just going to demonstrate it one time for the video. So this piece here is going to be the side pocket piece. What I'm doing is I'm just marking with my pencil all the locations of where the nylon webbing straps are going to be. The top webbing strap is going to be a combination of Velcro and webbing. So what I've done is I've cut them out and I'm just going to sew them both together. So I'm going to start by clipping them, put them on the sewing machine, and that's going to be our top webbing strap. So above that Velcro webbing strap is just an actual piece of Velcro, and that will just be sewn directly to the fabric. So I'm going to clip everything in place and then we'll put it on the sewing machine and we'll start sewing this together. Okay, so the first webbing strap is that Velcro and webbing which we just sewed on the machine there. So now we're going to stitch it to the side. These are going to be temporary 1/8 inch seam allowance stitches. These are going to be stitched over with a 1/2 inch seam allowance later in the project. We just want to secure them in place at this point. So this part of the project is very time consuming. As you can see on the project here, I got little white dots. These are going to be the sewing locations for all the MOLLE webbing straps. And this piece here, this is just the top piece of Velcro. So this is going to be sewn directly to the fabric. I'll just sew a box into it and that should hold it in place pretty good. So we have one of these side pockets on either side of the bag. So this whole piece here, you're going to have to do this twice. Okay, so we're still working on the side pocket here. These are going to be the gusset pieces for the zipper. This zipper is just a number 5 zipper. It's a plastic one. If you've made any of my other projects, you're going to be very familiar with how I do the zippers. So we're just going to place the zipper on top of the gusset piece and start by putting a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. Then what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over, put a nice crease in it, and then we're going to go down the edge about 1/8 of an inch just to do a second stitch and to make it look nice and functional. So as soon as we have the one side done, we're going to do the same. We're going to take that other gusset piece, place it on top, 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down, fold it over, and then about 1/8 inch stitch all the way down it, and this piece will be finished. And just remember, there's 2 side pockets, so everything we're doing here is going to be done 2 times. So this is the side pocket bottom gusset piece, and we're going to connect it to the zipper piece we just created. We're just going to clip it in place, and then we're going to put 1/2 inch seam down either side of it to secure it in place. Just remember when you're putting these pieces together to make sure that the good sides are facing each other, or right sides together. This way, when you turn this project inside out, it's going to display all the good sides of the fabric on the outside. I'm going to finish off this edge here by sewing just a 1 inch piece of edge binding. Okay, so it's time to connect our side pocket piece to our side pocket gusset. We'll start off by clipping it together, then we will go all around the perimeter with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this will connect the 2 pieces together. So you may have noticed on the sewing pattern all these little relief cut locations on the gussets. That's to ensure that these pieces can actually go around the corner. So I'm going to go around the perimeter here on a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just removing the clips as I go. If you cut all these shapes to the right size, this should fit together perfectly. So the bag that I'm creating here, I'm actually going to be using it for travel, so I'm kind of going overboard on the stitching. So some locations will only need 1 stitch, I'm doing like 2 or 3 stitches. I'm just going to finish off the edge here with a piece of 1-inch edge binding. I'm not going to bore you with stitching it. I'm just going to clip it in place and then go around it with a stitch just to secure it. Once the edge is completed, I'm going to turn it inside out, and this piece here is actually going to be sewn to the inside liner piece. So just place it on top of the inside liner piece, and you're going to want to clip it. This is going to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance down the bottom 3 sides, but the top side near the carry handle is actually going to be folded under, and there's going to be a 1/8 inch stitch there. You'll know what I mean in a couple of minutes when you see it here. It's just kind of hard to explain. So it's a little bit finicky, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put a 1/2 inch seam allowance in the bottom 3 sides. So this side, the bottom, and then the other side. And then I'm going to leave the top side open because that's going to be folded under. And it's going to be a stitch over that and over the strap. So as you can see here, I did not sew the top, just the bottom 3. The bottom and the 2 sides were sewn on a 1/2 inch seam. And this piece here is actually going to be folded under a 1/2 inch. And then once it's folded under, I'm going to clip it in place and then align it to the inside liner piece and then go over it with a 1/8 inch seam. Just a 1/8 inch seam along that line. So this part here is a little bit finicky as well, but what I've done is I've actually put some pins in it to make sure that the piece doesn't stray up or down, so I have a nice even line as I'm stitching. You can see the pins coming up here. I'm just removing them. I just don't want this straying up and down. I want a nice even line when I'm sewing it. Okay, so this piece is completed. As you can tell, we have a nice even stitch all the way across. We have that carry handle sticking out as well as the D-ring. Okay, it's time to get cracking on another pocket here. So this is going to be labeled as an end pocket on the updated sewing pattern. As I'm sewing these, I'm always trying to update them just to keep the latest sewing pattern as current as possible. So if you do have the sewing pattern, make sure you refer to the pattern and not the video, because as I said, I want the patterns to be current and these videos are only shot one time. So this is going to be called the end pocket, but it's going to practically be almost identical to the front pocket as far as sewing it goes. So the same thing as the other pocket here. I have all my webbing pieces in place, and I'm going to go around the perimeter here, just sew about a 1/8 inch seam just to hold the webbing pieces in place. Just temporary, because I said it's going to have a 1/2 inch seam around the edges eventually, so that'll be what we use to actually hold them properly. And as I said, with the molly straps, I've marked them with little white dots. Very time consuming, but it's what you got to do when you're making tactical gear. So one of the difference between the side pocket and the end pocket is that the end pocket only has this little strip of Velcro, where the side pocket will have a full strip the whole way. So it's the same technique to sew it on, just sew a box around it, and that should keep it in place. So sewing the end pocket zipper gusset is going to be identical to sewing the zipper gusset on the side pocket. We're going to take our zipper and our gusset piece, clip them together, 1/4 inch seam all the way down, fold it over, 1/8 inch seam over top, and that will do the trick. And I'm using the same zipper throughout the whole project. This is just a number 5 plastic zipper. It's kind of like a cheaper version of a YKK Vislon zipper. So our first stitch here is going to be that 1/4 inch seam all the way down, and then we'll fold it over and the 1/8 inch seam. A little sewing hack here, if you want to make your exposed stitches look straighter, is use a longer stitch length. So usually I recommend like a 3mm, but doing something like this, if you're using like a contrasting thread and you want it to look nice, just bump it up to like a 4mm, and your stitching it's a lot more forgiving. Okay, so we're going to connect the other side of the zipper gusset, and just remember that make sure the good sides face each other, okay? Right side to right side, and then when you turn it inside out, your good side will be facing outwards, and your project will be awesome. Okay, it's time to connect the bottom gusset. So this is going to be the same as the side pocket. You're going to want to clip it to the piece. Make sure both good sides face each other, right side to right side, and clip it in place. And then each end of this is going to get that 1/2 inch stitch. I've gone ahead and I've finished off the edges of this with the 1-inch nylon edge binding, just like on the side pocket. It's one of those things you need to do before you clip it to the gusset, because you only have one opportunity to actually seal the edges of a gusset like that. So we're going to clip this gusset piece to the end pocket, and then we're going to go around the perimeter with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So once you've finished sewing, turn it inside out, and then this piece is going to be ready to attach to the main bottom gusset of this bag. Okay, so it's time to get started on the top flap of the bag. So this bag is going to have a big pocket on top with 2 zippers down either side, and then this little piece of Velcro here is going to secure it closed. After I made this bag for the first time, I actually changed this Velcro location. So instead of there being a 1/2 inch space there's actually a 1-inch space. So if you have the sewing pattern, use the measurements on the sewing pattern. That's going to give you a lot more flexibility further on in the project here. Okay, so once that Velcro's sewn on, we're going to put our zippers on and we're going to clip them in place. We're not going to sew them yet. What we're going to do is we're going to put another piece of fabric over top of this, and then we're going to clip it in place and sew it. But we're not going to sew these zippers all the way, okay, because we want to bend them out like this, and then we're going to turn this whole piece inside out, and then those zippers will be invisible in the finished product. So we're going to rearrange our clips here again. We're going to make sure that we're clamping the zipper on the inside of this, so it's going to be like a little zipper sandwich. What we want to do is we want to sew a 1/4 inch seam down the edge here, but we want to stop as soon as we reach the top of the Velcro. That way we're able to fold in the top piece here. You'll see what I mean in a couple of minutes. So we're going to start sewing our 1/4 inch seam all the way down the edge here. We're going to make sure we just take the clips away as we sew, because we don't want that zipper to shift inside. We want that zipper that we have sandwiched in there to stay in place. And as I said, we're going to stop sewing right at the top of that Velcro, and those zippers are going to be sticking out the side. And just be careful when you sew over those zippers. You don't want to break a needle. Okay, so it's time to turn this whole thing inside out, and you're going to notice that the zippers are now popping out at each side. You're going to have an open piece at the bottom, which is fine, but then you're going to have these flap overhangs here, and those are going to be folded in. So as I said previously in the video, I changed the distance between the Velcro and the top of the fabric from a 1/2 inch to 1 inch on the sewing pattern. That's give you an extra 1/2 inch of fabric to work with when you're folding this over. So as I was doing this, I noticed that a 1/2 inch isn't quite enough. So the most current version of the pattern has a spacing of 1 inch and not a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to take this loose fabric and I'm going to fold it on the inside, and then I'm going to stitch over top to secure this end and make it look as neat as humanly possible. So both sides of the loose zipper there I've folded under the top piece, and then the bottom piece is just folded under. That way when I'm sewing, I don't have pieces of zipper getting under my needle. So if you're not noticed, I'm just using a cheap domestic machine here. So if you're using 600 denier Cordura nylon, you should be fine. I'm using 1000D, so it's kind of testing my machine a little bit, but it still works. We're going to be finishing these zippers the same way I finish all my zippers. We're going to fold it over and do a 1/8 inch seam all the way down. But on this, make sure you're pulling the zipper out as far as you can pull it out, okay? Because as I said, you turn this piece inside out and the zipper's not going to want to stick out. So make sure you pull on it to ensure that it takes out all the slack. So this piece we're working on here, this is going to be the gusset that the top flap connects to on either side. So we're going to just clip this just the same way as we do any other zipper gusset. So we'll do the 1/4 inch seam down, fold it over, 1/8 inch seam, and these will be zipped to the top flap. Okay, so it's time to install our number 5 zipper sliders. These sliders actually came with a zipper, so I was happy about that, 'cause sometimes they don't. And always remember to install these, because I can't tell you how many times I've made a project and forgot the sliders and there's no way to actually use the zipper. So make sure you always remember those. So it's time to connect our 2 end pockets to our main bottom gusset piece. So this is kind of simple here. So we're just going to clip it around, and we're going to sew 1/2 inch seam along the top 3 sides, and the bottom we're actually going to fold under and sew, just like we did on the side pocket piece. So we'll go around the top 3 sides with a 1/2 inch seam allowance just to secure this in place, and then we'll get started on the bottom. Remember, you're going to have to do this twice because you got 2 end pockets. So I've folded under the bottom piece and clipped it in place, and then we're just going to go along the edge here with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So the goal now is to try and make the main gusset for the bag. So we've got the bottom gusset with the 2 pockets connected. Now that flat piece we created is going to be clipped to one side, and that's going to be our next piece of this gusset assembly. I'm just demonstrating here kind of what the main shape is going to look like. You're going to want to sew a 1/2 inch seam along the flap here. Make sure that both good sides are facing each other, okay, right side to right side on this gusset assembly. You don't want to sew this flap on backwards. So this piece here is going to be the corresponding piece to the other Velcro we have on the flap. It's a nice simple piece. We just cut out the shape, cut out a piece of hook Velcro. We're going to stitch them together. Just sew a little box into the hook Velcro here to secure it. And then we're going to start folding it and sewing the edges. Okay, so we're just going to fold it in half, clip it, and then we're going to put a 1/2 inch seam down either side. Once you've done your 2 1/2 inch seams, we're going to fold it inside out, pull it tight, and then we're going to sew 1/8 inch seam along the top, and that's just going to finish off the shape. I'm just going to use some scissors just to cut off the excess flap here. So previously we connected the flap to the other side of this gusset piece. So on the other side, the first step is to connect this little flap we just created, and then the other side of that flap will actually be placed on top of this and sewn. So we'll start off by just doing a 1/2 inch seam along the edge. Okay, so our flap is secured, it works, it looks good. Now we're gonna fold over that gusset piece and clip it in place. We're only sewing the either side here. We're not gonna sew the actual flat part, just the 2 end pieces you see there. The piece in between the zippers we're not gonna sew, and that's kinda what it should look like at this point. So as I said previously, I don't recommend using 1000 denier Cordura nylon. on a domestic machine. If you have an industrial machine, awesome, but on one of these, not so much. So if you're using domestic machine, I highly recommend 600 denier. My cheap domestic machine is really being tested by this 1000 denier right now. I've gone ahead and I've just sealed the edge with some edge binding. So if your project's looking like this, you should be on the right track. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn this whole thing inside out. We need to connect each side pocket to it now. That's the last thing to do. This is going to be just the same technique as doing the side pockets. You're just going to clip around the perimeter, and then we're going to do a 1/2 inch seam all the way around. So as you can tell, I'm using very heavy materials on a very light machine here. There wasn't actually enough space on my desk to set up the camera, so you're going to get the overhead view. This took me a very long time. I had to go very slowly because I didn't want to overwork my machine or break needles, but as you can tell, it is doing it, but just not at the pace an industrial machine would do it. So we're going to do the same with the other pocket. We're going to clip it in place, 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the edge, and that will finish off our bag. So if you like this video, please consider subscribing to my tiny channel here. Hit the like button, leave me a comment. All those little things you do really helps my channel grow. If you want to get this sewing pattern for yourself, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.